Good morning, social media land. It is Merritt with Master of One Coaching, and we are here once again on Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern Time to bring you Leadership Live Friday. Yay! Cue the applause. And this morning, I am so pleased to bring my colleague and someone who I have a great amount in common with over the years, go figure, Isabel Dichiara. And Isabel, you and I met many moons ago through
Yes.
the Females of Arts with Hudson.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, we
And
did.
you have since done many different things. So I'm just, without getting too much into your introduction, I'm just going to say, please tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
My
I always
pleasure.
love to, my husband tells me I collect people on LinkedIn. And so it's
Yeah.
one of my favorite things. So I'm the executive director of the Westchester County Bar Association. I've been here for about 4 years. I am not a lawyer. I've said over, especially the last 2 years, I play a lawyer on TV because I'm on Zoom all the time. But I actually started out, I went to film school because when I was 17 years old, I was going to be a film director and I was going to win an Oscar. And I don't do that. And I got to film school and that wasn't really my thing. But what I did learn is I was a really good planner. I'm a really good planner and I was a really good organizer and a budgeter. So I did that for everybody's student films. And that's kind of what I did. And I didn't really know how to apply it. It was, the mid 1990s. You went to school, you figured out what you were going to do, and you did it. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So I worked and I landed a couple of years out of school with a not-for-profit organization in one of those, the American Cancer Society, in one of those jobs that you do everything, right? You fundraise, you do programs, you have a little board. I was like 25 years old and they're like, here, go do this, raise all this money. And I figured out that I could apply what I knew. And it started the pathway 20 plus years later of not-for-profit organizations. So I've worked in fundraising, I've worked in programming. I did national fundraising once upon a time for the March of Dimes. And then I did a long stint and transferred those skills into more of a marketing side. And I worked for a large now health system doing marketing and community programs and all of those things as well. And then I landed here because this was kind of a combination. And I've gone back and forth with the arts and stuff in there. How we met, I worked for theater for a while doing fundraising after my little boys, who are now 7.5, were born and needed to shift my priorities a little bit for a while with twins. And then twins, it's life, and here you go. And here I am. So, and it's been interesting. Half my time with the Bar Association was all in-person events, and that's what we did. And then half of it's not been. So it's been an interesting little ride.
Well, I so appreciate, so part of what you and I have in common is we both went to NYU for specific programs. We both went to art school there. And both went to 17 and said, yes, you will sign up for the thing you're going to do the rest of your life. There you go. And oops, never mind. And also what you said about how you realized that through your training as a film student, you actually realized that you were a great planner and that you were a great budgeter and you were able to manage projects. And I always say, and I say it on this program all the time, I say it in life all the time, that I got some of my best job skills, human skills, and certainly leadership skills from going through those processes in art school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It was amazing. You'd walk in 18. I want you to make a film. Here's your stuff. There's a script. There's Manhattan. Give me a product in 3 weeks. And you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but you just did it. And the people who, there were people who've out of my class, I know were really successful. I remember watching one on Cribs. Anybody remember Cribs 20 years ago? Gosh. There was somebody I knew on MTV Cribs, which was kind of wild. People who went to work for, network television shows. A lot of us know a lot of different skills, but I realized really early that the part of it that people couldn't do, the really creative people who had the vision for the film, they couldn't get out of their own way. They couldn't figure out how to get people where they needed to be, how to keep to a time, how to know how to get them fed. I mean, it seems like simple things, but that was what drives their production.
And those are all leadership skills, right? I mean, be able to say like, oh, I got to take care of I have to feed the people, because if I keep them here for 16 hours in the middle of the night in a snowstorm and expect them to perform at their best, they might want a snack.
Exactly. And that's a lot of where I am now.
Yeah.
That I have, we're back to live events again to a certain extent. And I have 2 big ones this spring. And the piece that when I have, my members of the board and the people who are a part of the events worry about things like food. They worry about the specifics of the food and these things. And I'm like, well, no shellfish, no this, no that, keep the allergens down, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, then I'm good. And they're like, don't you want to taste the food? I'm like, no. It's fine. I trust them. We hired them. The food will be fine. As long as you meet my 4 criteria, we're good.
That's such a good point too, because oh my gosh, yes, thank you for saying we hired them because they are good at their job. We hope, right? We're going to trust that. That's another skill set that I think that approach framework that I think is so kind of drilled into you when you are in the theater or in film or in a collaborative art form like that, because you have to put the right genius in the right seats, right, in the right roles, and then allow them to do their thing. Step back and let them do their thing.
Absolutely. And that's hiring. I mean, I went through some hiring pretty recently at the organization, and I hired people into roles that I actually, it's a little wacky. We didn't actually advertise them. We advertised different roles, and then I adjusted the roles because I found people I wanted to hire.
Yeah.
And then I reallocated what was going to be under their responsibilities based on who they were, because I knew that they, as an individual, would be a good asset to the organization. And that there were things I had allocated to a specific job that was not going to be their forte. So I was like, that's okay. I can shift this, do that. And now I have the right person in the organization who can grow with us. Because in a crazy universe, my organization actually grew in the last 2 years by a lot. People, you think going into the pandemic that we were a 100% in-person organization. You came for your education, you came to a networking event, you came to a dinner, golf, whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, sorry. And I was like, okay, I shut my doors, and I remember it vividly. It was a mess. My kids were sick that week. I was supposed to be in Chicago. I canceled a trip, the whole thing, and I shut the office down. But I'm a planner, right? So I could somehow, and I'm a good contingency planner. So if I think I want to be somewhere on this specific date and time, I will have 5 different ways to do it. So when I saw things coming in the legal community in Westchester, it was scary, because that's where the first hit was, and the first diagnosis was an attorney in the county. So everybody was paranoid. And that week I was like, do you have a computer? Do I need to get you a computer? All of my staff that I had at the time, let's get you tied into the network. Let's do all these things. And when I shut the doors on Friday the 13th, we did our first online program, which we'd never done, on March 30th. 17 days later, we were on Zoom with a speaker we'd never used before to talk to people about the professional side, not their education, which we always did, not their continuing legal ed that we needed to give them credit for, but what do you do if you have to furlough somebody? What do you need to do for them? How do you help them with their insurance? How do you make sure your staff who are home can access things? Like, we did that in 17 days. And part of that is my desire to have a path, and to just, if it's thrown in front of me, figure it out and just figure it out.
Well, and so when I hear you talking about all this, I mean, the planning and the contingencies and the collaborative effort, or the collaborative energy that you bring to, who's the right person in the right role, and we're going to make it work so that, because the culture is what you're talking about, right? Creating a right culture fit, and that can be kind of that's a big topic. But when we're talking about who's going to be committed, who's going to show up, who's going to bring the right energy, who's going to roll up their sleeves, right? Which is the kind of energy that you're talking about, and especially nonprofits. Yeah. So you have the energy you're bringing is very passionate. So that kind of leads me to this, like, where do you think you found, and I know you express it in many different roles, so it's not necessarily that it's, one job over another, but where does this passion for that collaborative the planning, the strategy? Where do you think that comes from? Or do you know?
I don't know that I know. I know that I like to see things. I want to see something get done, and I want to see it get done the right way. As much as you want to sit there and believe that I can do everything all by myself and it's completely fine. I'm totally fine. Um, I know I can't. I mean, I know I can't. And it's, I want people to have success. And in nonprofit, a lot of what you do when you're on the staff side, you stay. It's the, like the Wizard of Oz, right? We're the
Mhm.
man behind the curtain a lot of the time.
Mhm.
And I've told folks in the past, like they'll like, oh, come out so we can say thank you. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm just gonna stay over here. I'm good. But it's that whole vibe of I want them to be successful because you have somebody who chairs an event, or they're going
Mhm.
to speak for you, or they're going to do all of those things that I want them to have a good experience. And I want them to feel like their contribution was important. So I like to sit behind it. We always joke, and now it's getting to be such an old movie. I don't know that anybody knows broadcast news anymore, but there was
Yeah.
this sequence where it's like I say it here and it comes out there
Uh-huh.
with the news. And that's one of those things that I love to do. I've sat there with a phone and texted somebody and said, like, make sure you say X, because I could say it, but I'm staff, and it's not important coming from you. It's important coming from you because
Mhm.
you're the chair of this event, or this is a piece that you should say because it's going to show the leadership that you need to have as whatever that role is. And it does well. And I like that piece of it because you still feel success and you can watch somebody else be successful. It's kind of like your kids. You want them to do well. And when they do well, you feel good. And it's the same kind of energy.
Yeah. So there's like a facilitating approach, and also I
Mhm.
guess the producer. I just keep hearing the
Yeah,
producer. Like
it is. It really is.
I'm
It's
gonna,
that
I'm gonna,
like
yeah.
production component.
Hmm. Yeah. Fantastic. That's really cool. So do you have well, I mean, you told the story about when you went to school and you sort of realized that wasn't your jam. What was the, if you don't mind sharing, you can share it in, general terms as you want, but what was the moment where you went, oh, nope, not that, this, or I'm going to try this different direction?
Um, I think it's one of those I can look back and say that was probably it. And
Hmm.
I absolutely did not know it at the time because I was whatever I was, 25 years old or something. And I worked for the American Cancer Society in North Carolina. I went down there for a variety of reasons, and I got the job. And I was like, "Wow, this is a great job! It pays way more than the junky retail jobs I was doing out of school because I couldn't get a job." Um,
Hmm.
and they gave me two counties. North Carolina has 100 counties. So our jobs, they give you geographic responsibilities. And I had two counties. One of them was relatively successful, a little more affluent. The other one was like one road went north south and one road went east west through the entire county. And there was like one town. It had never been successful. All the volunteers seemed ancient at the time. They were probably, I was a lot younger, so I'm sure they were older, but they were not like 9,000, which is what I thought. And
Right.
their special event never made any money. It never made any money because nobody ever gave them any time. And I went up there and I was like, well, why not? And from an event that literally made like $2,500, and this is the Relay for Life, right? Those events around the country make tens, hundreds, millions of dollars, right? And our
Mhm,
little
mhm.
event made like $2,500. And I'm like, we can make $10,000. And they're like, no, we can't. I'm like, so can. And we did. And then it was like, well, your event's the wrong time of year. Theirs was in the fall and the events were supposed to be in the spring. And I was like, so let's do it again. And they were like, what? And I said, let's do it again in April when we're supposed to. They're like, we can do that. And I was like, sure. And then we just won't do it again in the fall. We'll do it. We'll move you. And they were like, okay. And we did it again. And we made like $10,000 again. So this little county that made, $2,000, $3,000 once a year on their event came out with 20 grand. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool at the time. Now looking back, it's like, well, that's kind of when I realized it didn't matter how old I was or how much experience I had. If I kind of brought the right attitude into the situation, listened to people, because I don't know
Mm-hmm.
everything, and worked with them that we could actually do something pretty cool.
That's such a great, I love that story. It's like, I mean, because it's always in retrospect, right? You sort of see the through
Yeah.
line when you go, oh yeah, that all makes sense to put together. But again, that sense of like, there, here's a camera, here's a bunch of people, here's, some sticks and glue, go make a film.
Yeah.
And all right, oh, okay, well, here's here's one row going this way, one row going this way, and a bunch of people go raise $10,000.
Right. There's nothing there. And I was like, sure, I could totally do that.
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
not? And we did, which was pretty cool. Yanceyville, North Carolina. It's like this big.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's such a great story to illuminate, again, this idea of like the transferable skills and understanding that we are not just widgets or like robots that go and make widgets, that we actually can take what are the skills that we know are true to be inherently ours and contribute or use them to contribute in ways that we may not even think, but be innovative, explore, and play with that a little bit, rather than box ourselves into this idea that we have to do one thing with it or one set of things. You and I were talking before we went live about, going to college and signing. And you said that too, like I'm going to sign up for this program and do the thing for the rest of my life. And my son is now saying that too. He's 17. He's like, I want to be a teacher. I'm like, okay. Or do other things. Like, but I want to be a teacher. Okay, great. Be a teacher.
That's awesome.
Or do other things.
Make sure you do maybe some other things along the way. I get that with my children are younger, and it's like, what are they into? I'm like, well, I have 3 boys. They all dance. They all play lacrosse. Oh, this one wanted to try a singing class. Okay. My big issue on sports or activities is if there's like a season, or with dance, there's a recital, you committed to those people, so you follow through. If you want to quit when you're done, you can quit when you're done, but they're expecting you to be there. So you have to be there for them through the end of whatever that term is, and then try something else. It's fine. If you don't try, then, you're not going to know what fits.
Well, that brings us also into this idea of social or impact, right? Like consciousness, conscious leadership, and conscious impact. And so we were talking before we went live about a couple of things that you're doing. So I would love you to speak a little bit about that.
Sure. I think it became, attorneys, not being one, there's not always positive feelings towards attorneys in culture. But, attorneys, there's a lot of them. I told you before, there's over 200,000 attorneys in the state of New York. And where I am in Westchester, I know where I'm in Westchester, there's more than 10,000. So our organization has about 1,900 members. That's attorneys and law students and paralegals, and it's people who do business with attorneys. So sometimes those are bankers or whatever. So it's about 1,900 people. It's a lot of people. We had a tendency 2 years ago, our focus was always, well, we need to get them their credits. Attorneys need credits, continuing ed credits to maintain their license. So that was our focus. We do that. We get them together to do things. And then we kept talking about doing more. And the pandemic was a good kind of driver to get us there, that we started doing some more community work. And in the last year, especially under our current president, we did a whole push we have a lot of committees, and we had those folks think about ways that they could contribute to the community in some way. And it's been, some of them are much more hands-on, whether it's the food bank or park cleanup. And then some of them have been a little bit more of an intangible, cannabis law, right? In the state of New York, there's a lot of things that have changed. We did some stuff on how do people, if they have convictions, get them expunged from their records. For attorneys, like, how do you work with people to help them through the process? And then for a person, not an attorney, like, how do you think about that? Like, what should you be thinking about? And do you actually qualify? And what do you need to do? It's a huge thing, because if that stays on your record, it impacts employment, could impact housing. There's a whole lot of stuff there. We even did a program this week on student loan forgiveness. It's actually on the WCBA website. It is free. Doesn't matter. It's not just law school. It's undergrad. If you have student loans, there's this magic window you're in right now where if you work in public service or for a not-for-profit organization, that's a big deal. You can apply to get your loans forgiven if you've worked within the right amount of time. And there's a lot of wiggle room right now for people who maybe haven't been on the right path. It's repayment plans and all this stuff, technical stuff. But if you haven't been there, like, this is potentially life-changing for somebody. If you have $50, $70, $100,000 or more in student loans, and you work you're a physician who works at a not-for-profit hospital, you have the potential to get your loans forgiven. That could change your life. So that's been a big deal to be able to see that come to fruition this year for folks, and the ways that our members have been a lot more creative about how they could use their own skills as attorneys and then just as individuals to do something more for the community. And I like that we're a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this until I'm blue in the face. One of the gifts of the pandemic has been that we have shed some of these false ideas that we have barriers around us, right? And that there needs to be work us and home us. And then there's me in the community this way and me in the community that way. Like, nope. We are whole people.
And that was definitely me. I was a silo person. Like, I commute an hour each way, and I like that. There's a part of me that really likes that, because I can listen to my music that nobody else likes, and I can listen to audiobooks, or I can make a phone call, and I can separate. It's like you put on your work coat to come here and you take it off to drive home. And I really struggled at the beginning with that. It's like, well, I don't want everybody in my house. I don't want you in my house. You can see a picture of my kids, but you don't need to see them. And I was like, well, no, this is not going to work. I mean, I have my own weird workspace that I work in at home, but that I can get away from people. But that's a mental health thing, to make sure that you give separation. Or for people like me who work at night, sometimes I don't want to disrupt my whole household. So, but it's hard. It was very hard to let that piece through.
Yeah. And so that's the difference between like barriers and boundaries, I think, right? Like learning, because one of the downsides of that is that many of us lost all boundaries. So we started working, around the clock and on the weekends and all the time, right? So then we have to kind of bring this pendulum back into the boundary place. And but sometimes my kids would come say hello, and sometimes to clients, and they love it, and other times they don't. The clients don't really feel good about that, or they want to be interrupted, or I don't want to be interrupted. So, or my kid's not wearing a shirt, which sometimes happens.
I have boys. I'm there.
Yeah, right. Something else we have in common.
I learned delayed delivery. I had never really worried about that on Outlook, and I was like, oh, delayed delivery. I can write my emails at 2 a.m. and you'll get them at 9, and you don't think I'm completely, working in the middle of the night.
Or that the demand signal doesn't go to the other person and say, oh my gosh, they're up at 2 a.m. I should have at 2 a.m. too. Like, no.
And especially, I worked really hard and I still do, to make sure that the folks that are on my team understand that they do have a boundary. I have a person who had a baby 9 weeks ago. And I was like, if you answer email, particularly in those first 6 weeks, like, I'm going to shut down your access. So you're a grown up. I have 3 kids. I get this. I was the person who answered emails from the L&D suite after my oldest was born, because that was me. I'm like, don't be me. Please don't be me. Be home. And don't answer. And it's okay. It's really okay. We're good. And, I did that. I worked really hard on that to make sure that my folks did that. Like, if you're going to work at 10 o'clock at night, I want to make sure you weren't also working at 7 o'clock in the morning, unless you had a block of time during the day when you were not available. And that's okay too, as long as we're getting our jobs done. Yeah.
It's so tricky because you're right, in nonprofit work and in the arts, and I mean, not just in any industry, there can be this lack of boundary for sure, or this idea that we're going to work until we're bleeding, and giving our whole soul away to our work. So to be able to this emerging trend, or emerging awakening, I'll say, I hope it's not just a trend, of understanding what it is to be. I mean, the whole idea like work-life balance, which is really a myth. I mean, there is no such thing, because balance to me indicates like 50-50, like there's a scale, and it's like, oh, if it's out of balance, then oh no, there's shame or something wrong there. Really, I like to talk about it in terms of harmony. Like, harmony is maybe that you need to work on a weekend because there's an event or there's something that's really important you got to get through. But then the next weekend, you're going to spend all of that time with your kids and you're going to say, you know what? I'm not answering any emails. I'm not answering any texts, or I'm going to take that week off after I spent, a week solid on something. Like just to have that, the understanding and the ease that it will all kind of work out so long as you have your priorities intact. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, so just to remind everybody, if you have any questions for Isabel or anything you want to say, I really appreciate everybody being here today. This is Isabel Dichiara, who is the executive director of the Westchester
County Bar Association.
County, thank you. I knew I was missing the C. County Bar Association. Thank you. And so this is the point of the program when we say, Isabel, if you had one golden nugget of wisdom to share with the audience, what would that be?
I think it's very much, I'm going to go back to this one of thinking about not keeping yourself in a box, thinking about, what you yourself are good at. What do you like? What skills do you bring, as opposed to, I am a marketing director, so that's all I am, or I am a this, so that is all I am. You've got to get outside of that little pigeonhole you put yourself in to think about how your skills apply. And that goes whether it's work or outside. I'm on other boards of directors, and part of the reason I'm there, it's not because I'm the executive director of the Bar Association. It's because I used to do X, so I'm useful to this board of directors. And it's just thinking about you going into the role or into whatever the opportunity is, what you're going to bring, as opposed to what that piece of paper behind you says you can do.
Yeah. And what opportunities are available when we start thinking that way, that like, oh, I'm a really quick learner. And so, and I may be able to put context around this skill set in a new environment that I didn't necessarily think of before, because it's interesting to me. Like, what if I want to be the executive director of the Bar Association instead of, moving away from not away from, but moving from one position that was arts oriented into one that's law oriented. Like,
how do I do that? It's challenging. I'm not going to lie, because when you go into that, if you're interviewing for a job, you have to be super, super prepared to be able to defend that position and confident enough, whether it's confident in that moment or you're confident enough across the board to do that in that role, because it's tough. People are very much like, oh, well, you didn't do X, so you're out. But you don't run in. I think it's getting better that people aren't necessarily looking at every title you had before to put you in the next title. They're more thinking about what you're capable of. But I think hopefully that keeps changing. I really hope that keeps changing.
I mean, Simon Sinek always talks about you can, hire for talent, hire for commitment, hire for culture, hire for quality. You can teach skills, but
definitely,
because it's just, if you find somebody who's really excited to be there and also has a set of skills that is transferable, or that transmutable anyway, and you don't want to make a leap that makes complete nonsense for yourself either, because then you might find yourself floundering in a way that doesn't feel good to anybody. Right. But what are some of the through lines that you can pull out of yourself and say what's possible based on what I know about myself, based on what I've done before, what I know I like, what I know I don't like, also really important, right? I know I don't like that.
If you're an event planner, you're an event planner. It doesn't matter whether you work in corporate or nonprofit or for an event, whatever you work in, that skill set is that skill set. It's like learning a new language. I worked in healthcare a long time, so I had to speak doctor. Now I don't work in healthcare. I work with attorneys, so I had to learn how to speak lawyer. It's a little different. Personalities aren't that different, but the language that you use is a little different, and that's skill. That's not, that's a simple skill to learn when you want to learn it. It's not about what your background is.
I always say that I speak education because I work with I worked with teachers and school districts for so long. It's like,
Right.
and also I have 3 kids with special needs. So I was like, here's the file. Let's talk about all the things education that we need to do for these kids, right? Oh, did I lose you for a second? Anyway, okay. So thank you so much for being here today. And I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your brilliance, your transferable skills, your experience. And Amma says, thank you.
Oh. You're very welcome. Happy to be here.
If you need to get a hold or want to get a hold of Isabel, what's the best way for them to do that? Email, website?
Email's always better. It's an easy one. It's my first name. No last name, not too many vowels, just first name, Isabel at WCBA-NY.org.
NY.org. I'm putting it in the comments there.
Awesome. We're on social. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn as an organization, and relatively active. So happy to connect with folks there too.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I hope that we get to do more things together soon. We've been having some things in the works. So yay.
Yep.
Exciting.
Thank you.
And thank you again, everybody, for joining us here on Leadership Live Friday. We always love coming to you live with exciting, wonderful guests like Isabel and trying to bring our golden nuggets of wisdom about leadership and all things work culture and purpose, mission-driven, good juju. I'm feeling really articulate today.
It's awesome. It's perfect. It's exactly what I was thinking.
But anyway, thank you all for being here today, and we will see you next time. Have a great weekend, everybody.